All right, welcome everybody. Welcome panelists. My name is Guy Reams. I'm the moderator for today. I come from a company called Askturing that's based here in San Diego. And we have with us today Tallat from Vectara. Vectara. That's a cool name. How did you get that name?
We derived that from vectors. So these embedding models, they generate vectors, and that's where this came.
See, I couldn't get a name like that for my RAG product. I had to call it Turing. I'm jealous.
That's not right.
Sahil, welcome.
Thank you.
All the way from New York.
I'm just awaiting my red-eye flight back.
And you're not from Regal Theaters, you're from Regal, the AI company.
Correct. Despite my affinity for popcorn, I am from Regal, where we treat your customers like royalty.
Awesome. And Andy from Computer Vision Company?
Yep. Okay, there we go. Yep, so Andy Ballester from Eyepop.ai.
And Mark from you're from the Bay Area, also from Ireland.
I am based in San Francisco, despite the Irish accent, yes.
Well, we actually, Americans have an affinity for people with Irish accents. So we'll just listen to you talk this whole time.
Cool, sounds good.
Awesome. Well, we're here to talk about AI tools becoming your teammate. I'll shorten the topic from that big long sentence. I think the five of us are probably, I think, we would be experts in this area because we are probably aggressively using AI to automate as much as possible within our own companies, I would dare say. Since we know that these tools are available, we're using them aggressively. So I guess we would be a pretty good authority on how well they work as teammates, which I think they don't. Let's just get that out there. Does anybody here think they actually make a really good teammate?
We're trying to get them there, basically.
That's but they're not there yet,
But
right?
they're not, yeah.
There was a company in the thing, I forget their name, they were advertising that they actually had an AI teammate.
So we have, in general, bad teammates as well, right? So AI can be a bad teammate, but it's definitely getting better.
Yeah, it's like having my high school kids working for me, basically. It'd be the same level of I know that Sahil, we talked about, I think it was you that I talked about measuring these things, right? So if you actually get an AI tool working in your environment, and you actually get it to start performing tasks and responding to things and automatically doing them for you without any interaction. Let's say you actually get to that level. Now what? Do we measure them? Have you had any success measuring their performance?
Yeah, so there's a great book from the 1980s called The Goal, and it's an industrial engineering book, and it's all about automation in factories, and it's set in this like declining town in the Midwest, and like an alcoholic manager who's trying to save his plant. It's quite interesting. And the entire point is he tries to bring automation into his plant. He adds automation to steps at random, and then he doesn't see any economic benefit because he's just built up inventory at steps because he hasn't actually addressed the bottlenecks of the entire process. It's super simple, but commonly missed when we see customers adopt AI or even us adopting AI. Like I have seen my team members generate hundreds of awful slides and presentations because they haven't figured out the real bottleneck is not making the slide, but it's knowing what you want to say in the first place. So yeah, I think from a measurement perspective, you want to understand working backwards, what is the overarching operational goal that's going to show up on your P&L? What are the leading indicator metrics that lead to that? What bottlenecks those metrics? And then how does AI remove those bottlenecks? You should see that kind of domino effect. But if you don't do that design work up front, you're going to kind of just apply automation at random, which will be very challenging to show the impact of down the line.
Andy, I think you and I had discussed this as well, this concept of, I know how to measure a human, right? But I imagine as you start using more agentic work in your environment, you're going to have to measure them completely differently. I think you had an interesting opinion on that.
Yeah, I think it is a lot like measuring a teammate. I like that framing of AI teammate. We don't just measure our teammates, our employees one time. We measure them all the time. Real world data is messy. Use cases drift, data drifts. And so you want to make sure you have those processes for yourself and in your workflow around, okay, what are my agents doing and how do I measure them over time and how do I make sure that they're not starting to drift away from the problem that I want them to solve, even when real world messy inputs change over time.
I want to talk a little bit about the shifting of the work, because I think we have this notion that agents are replacing work, but I have a feeling that it's really just shifting work. But let's table that for a second, because I want to address the elephant in the room, which is Claude. So, Mark, you and I were having a discussion about MCP, AI agents, using those in our own business. Walk us through your experience so far and how you've been using co-work, for example, to improve things.
Yeah, I think that we're really treating Claude as like the company brain now. And it's like mandated that everyone has to be using Claude in their day-to-day workflows. I think the first thing with getting started is like, it really was that step change with the latest models, I think back in February, where it was like, okay, this is actually a massive difference. And when co-work came online, we made sure that all the connectors were made. So for the different toolings that I use, like Granola for notes, like Gong for sales calls, HubSpot for our CRM, Gmail, basically we've given full access to Claude across the board for every tool that we use. And even now when we're procuring software, we won't buy a tool unless it has an MCP server and connects to Claude, because we've kind of got the enterprise license across the board, we have full visibility. And I know this is easier, we're a 25-person company, so it's very easy to kind of mandate this really quickly and start. We're also in person, so I can just look over people's shoulders and see how they're using Claude on a daily basis. But really, like, we've already seen massive efficiency gains where, like, our head of finance, I used to ask him, he kind of does RevOps and finance, and I'd be asking for like a forecast or something like that. And something that would have taken ages before, it's like a 2-minute turnaround sent to me on Slack. Even the actions and commands that we're using in Slack to just get information really quickly. I come from a sales background myself, so no longer annoying account executives for their forecast or like, how did that sales call go? I'll just like query it myself in Claude. So yeah, it's kind of like a bit of Big Brother, but it's definitely working.
So I've done this as well. I started playing around with Linear. We use Linear. It's like Jira for those that don't know. So Linear allows an MCP connection with Claude, which allows me to have co-work pick up ticket statuses and then move them to the next status and or report on delays or stuff like that and automate that process, which has been interesting. The problem with doing that is my token bill has gone through the roof. I don't know if you noticed this, but Claude charges the same for it doesn't downshift the model. It stays with the highest end model for the MCP tool call. Have you noticed that too?
Yeah, we're kind of lucky we're like YC alumni, so we've kind of like maxed out all the free tokens from Claude and OpenAI as possible through Bookface, so I get a lot of that. But no, it's the same reason, and for that very reason, we use Linear as well for support tickets, and we kind of stop at the last part of actually like automatically using Cursor or Claude Code to fix the bug. But where we use it is we'll triage the bug and give a load of context to the engineer, because what we're finding is some of our senior engineers spending like 3 hours trying to gather context before fixing a bug that takes 10 minutes. So even just automating that workflow using Claude connected to Linear, it's like if I'm a senior engineer, I go in there, I know exactly what the bug is, it's been replicated, and then the engineer will go complete the task. So I think that's kind of where there's like the gap still is between becoming a full AI teammate, is it's not closing the loop fully, and that's the way I look at it.
Now, with this topic of MCP, I can just feel Tallat squirming, because you come from a company that sells a more private type of environment for customers on premise. So do we trust setting up all these agents to crawl all over our MCP tools? I know you have an opinion on this.
Definitely. So what we observed is there are a ton of companies that are very, very wary of doing that. And in my opinion, for the right reasons, right? You don't know, once your data leaves your network, you don't know where it will end up, who will train on it. Even if you look at Claude, they, by mistake, released their source code, right? I'm not saying AI did that, but if they're over-relying on AI, well, did they miss some processes, whatever happened? So if they cannot control their own source code, how can you be so sure that once your data leaves your network to one of these big companies, they're not going to misuse it, they're not going to leak it, right? So what we see more and more is that companies, they want to stay on-prem. They want to be in control of their data sets, and then they feel comfortable that these agents can crawl their internal data sources. Because at that point, the problem that remains is that within their organization, who has access to the data should only be able to see answers from that data, right? But they're not worried about the data leaking outside. Second is, like you mentioned, the cost. So when they go on-prem, the costs become manageable, right? Because now, let's say they bought 10 GPUs or 50 GPUs, whatever, that's the maximum that they're going to pay for. After that, their agents are just going to use those resources, so there will not be any surprising bills. The worst that will happen is that if there's too much usage, their agents will get slower, but they're not going to get surprise bills. So that's what we are seeing, and that's why I'm a big proponent of on-prem, yes.
I was just consulting with a company this week where they CEO had a company-wide edict for everybody to use Claude in the company. And then they were shocked that their first month bill was $180,000 in token burn, which it's interesting to me.
Yeah. And I think right now, Claude, like Anthropic, they're subsidizing the LLM cost, right? Imagine the day they stop subsidizing, where will the cost go, right? So you want to make sure that you don't over-depend on them in a way that is going to be very, very expensive once you do that, right? So especially the open source models, they're getting very good, right? And as long as your hardness, your context engineering is right, you can get pretty close to what these closed source systems give you. So why not go that direction? And this is like long-term thinking.
Sahil, I can tell you want to say something. I just get this feeling.
Yeah, I think ultimately you can choose to go on-prem, you can choose to connect MCPs to all of your company's tools, and all of those things are great. I have seen companies mandate, token maxing, right? Like we want to see who's using the most. Obviously, if that becomes the metric, then people will go do as much as they can and, turn it up to the highest model on Claude. So I think like there's a lot of value in spending time designing which parts of the work you actually want the AI agent to address. In our world, we build voice agents for companies in regulated industries like insurance, financial services, and there's parts of the conversation that are complicated, emotional, messy, that we just say, like, just keep it with the human. It's okay, like that's what humans are really good at. But everything else that prevents those humans from spending their time on that high judgment, high creativity moment, like that's a great candidate for the tokens.
Yeah, I can just go ahead and have Claude comb through all my Spotify playlists all day long and burn up my token usage. So I'm cool with management.
Thank you for supporting the economy of San Francisco.
Do one of you do anybody want to comment on this? Is a pretty interesting topic, right? This idea.
Yeah, I love this topic. I was just talking to a startup CEO this past week, and they had that same sticker shock. They rolled out Claude across their entire company, and then they had this massive token bill at the end of the day. And so then they looked into, well, how were people using Claude? And just like we've gotten accustomed as workers, knowledge workers, to the size of things, like limiting how much we're storing in the cloud or on our hard drives or things like that. I think we haven't really thought about that really hard, of what context does an agent need to help me do the task that I'm in? And a great example recently is so he looked at this just massive amount of tokens coming out of his marketing department. And the reason it was so giant is they have these source PDFs that they use from trade shows. They really only need maybe half a page of that data for any given task, but they're uploading the PDF like every time into Claude, and they have a lot of these. And so really bringing human attention to the exact context that you want to give these LLMs. That's how you keep this process efficient, both from a token side, which helps both time to my answer and also the bill. And so I think that's the next level of domain knowledge around this sort of work is, okay, what does it really need? And what are the constraints I need to put around those things?
So quick sidebar on this, and I'll start with Mark. I'd like to ask all of us on the stage, how many little side projects do you have now going on with vibe coding personally? I think I have probably 50, and they're for everything. Like I now have, I track in my honey to-do list now with a vibe coded app. Or I now have a snail mail app that processes my snail mail for me that comes through my mailbox. So I'm creating all these little tools now. I'm just like a kid in a candy store. How many little side projects do you have going on, Mark?
I actually don't have many side projects, but I have lots of like different kind of AI agents just for, it's really just efficiency gains. I'm using a tool at the moment called Gumloop, which is like, to your point, I think, without jumping back, like if you're building an AI first company, so like for context, Solidroad, we're like an AI first quality assurance platform for enterprise CX teams. So like we are using LLMs to evaluate customer conversations, customer interactions. So we need to keep an eye on our own COGS and like ensure that we have good profit margins and gross profit margins, that like, because it can't just be cost plus tokens now. So by doing that, we're always looking at that. So then we're always looking internally to make sure we're not being stupid with how much we're spending on our AI bill. So yeah, like even Gumloop's a good example of a tool that I'm using now because it's LLM agnostic. So it's just like it's using various different models. It's not just using the latest and greatest from Claude. So I have things like, I think we were speaking before this, like I have like an AI agent that slacks me a summary of my emails in the morning. We have a team in Dublin, Ireland, as well as San Francisco. So an 8-hour time difference. I'm waking up to a lot of emails every morning, a lot of slacks. So I built an AI agent that just summarizes and prioritizes the things that I need to know, like as soon as I wake up in the morning, so I know what to action from that office before they go offline. That's probably one example. Yeah, that's kind of the one that I use the most. But yeah, I haven't built any like vibe coding apps. My co-founder and CTO definitely has built a lot.
The other day I was talking to a lady in Phoenix from a company, and she was in accounting. Her name is Alice, which is kind of interesting because we always use Alice in accounting in the computer science world. But Alice in accounting actually vibe coded her own app to do a PO report, an AP report. And I thought, okay, that's cool. But what happens when everybody in every department is creating these little apps, and now we have to maintain them, and we have to keep them running, and do we have a CI/CD pipeline for every user? I mean, is that where we're heading, right? What do you guys think? I mean, what are we gonna? We keep thinking Claude's going to take over the universe, but let's say it does take over the universe, and now suddenly we've got every employee creating 50,000 apps that we have to maintain. Is that?
Yeah, I think that one's really interesting because. You see, as coming from a software background, I'm used to the, concepts of tech debt and how do I document things and how do I know like that this thing is still running even though I put it live like 3 months ago. And so that's the kind of thing that now do you train everyone to have basically engineering practices in their automations that they're creating, or is that now a new role at a company to help everyone register the automations that they're creating and help them keep that quality assurance and make sure that we're not duplicating work and that two agents that are doing the same thing in the company are giving the same result? I've seen a lot of that. I was like, hey, I built a dashboard for myself, and like, hey, I also vibe coded a dashboard. Why don't these match up at all? They're working off the same data. And so those types of assumptions and centralization at companies, I do think is an important concept to at least address with your coworkers around using these automation tools.
Yeah, I think, you treat a jacket from Prada differently than the one you buy from Zara. And we're kind of entering like the Zara era of everyone building their own tools. And I think, I don't know about you guys, but sometimes after 2 or 3 wears from Zara, I'm like, I just move on. And I think we have to like be comfortable with a little bit of messiness, because the reality is if you try too hard to force a directive that like, hey, it only can be in this way and it must be scalable from day one, you're likely limiting the amount of creativity that that your team or your customers will be able to ultimately apply to the project that they're doing. So I think there's like this balance of like, how do you kind of create some degree of guardrails so people don't go crazy or violate any security protocols, but then also giving them the direction, just go do their own things. We have a RevOps team that has been building really powerful tools to help us see which deals, apply a MEDPIC framework to deals, use the call transcripts to figure out which parts we have and don't have and give the AEs a recommendation. Had I like top-down directed that, I don't know if we would have gotten as quickly to like the right answer, whereas like bottoms up, the RevOps person built something, took it to the AE, he's like, wrong, wrong, wrong. Then they went back, they did it again, and they did it again, and then they brought it to me, and I said, okay, now make a dashboard so I can see a summary of this. But the point being that I think you have to be comfortable with the degree of messiness, or you're not gonna create the information required to get to the right answer.
First, I do hope Alice is double checking the output of those agents for the profit and loss statement. So definitely you need a CI/CD process. You need much more than that, and we're already seeing that. Especially some of these agents that we release, they go to mission critical business use cases, right? So for that, there are some fundamental things you need to take care of. One of those is basically coming up with a strong test suite, basically, right? A benchmark data set and a test suite. So now when you do new releases, whether it's of the agent or your platform, you need to make sure that it's not breaking your existing stuff. Drift is a real thing. Everybody is aware of that, and it just gets worse, right? So you need to make sure that new releases of the agent, they do not make things worse. They improve things. Plus, it's like people try to think that agents is just, like you need to do prompt engineering. It sounds very simple, but it's very, very complicated, right? You need to make sure you have the right prompts. How did you come up with them? Does it follow your data set? Is it producing the right answer? How do you have the feedback loop to improve these prompts? Okay, fine. If I add this one sentence, it improves these 5 queries. But what about the 50 other is going to break, right? So how do you make sure you keep an eye on that? If you have a proper release process, you're gonna find this out before your end users find it out. So CI/CD definitely is gonna play a fundamental role in how you release new versions of your agents.
So I think as we develop more tools as teammates, we start to see a shift in the work. And you just alluded to this. My son is a history major. And if I stacked him up against some of my developers, my son would be a far better vibe coder, just simply because he has a lot more knowledge of things and his prompts are just more eloquent, which is interesting to me. However, you brought up the point. I don't know if you guys have had this problem, but I now have a backlog problem. Never in the history of my life have I had a problem where my backlog was empty. But it's literally getting to that point where I'm now under pressure to hire more people to get more into the backlog so that my developers can pick up work. Have you been discovering? I mean, I'm starting to see the speed kick in. Now, I may have more defects, right? I probably do. I'll have to look at this. I may have, I don't know what your experience is. I am seeing an increase in defects, but I am seeing a rapid depletion of the backlog. Are any of you seeing? Are you seeing that?
So that's definitely the case. So the issue is like, the current state of AI, it increases the efficiency of experienced folks a lot, right? Compared to a junior person. But then the senior people, they adopt slower, right? So then they are not taking as much advantage as the younger folks who were brought out with a lot of these things firsthand. So it's kind of like a weird combination. And as long as you're aware of that, I think you can adapt to that. So.
Anybody else have an opinion on that?
I think I completely agree with you. I've seen like a lot of younger people take up on vibe coding and getting things built much quicker. But I still think there is this like demo to production gap. So like anyone can kind of build something that's like demoable. And I've seen so many things, even like younger engineers demoing to me, being like, oh, what do you think of this? I'm thinking about quitting my job and going all out. And how do I raise money against this business? I'm like, okay, this looks cool, but like, does it work? It's like, no, it doesn't work. It's not really connected to anything. I'm like, okay, well, that's fairly useless then. So I think, yeah, like what we're seeing is like, the best engineers, like our senior engineers, are like, yeah, they're still like making detailed tech plans and putting time and effort and making sure that this isn't just something that we're going to just flash in front of a customer, get them excited, but it doesn't work. So like that's one thing that I always kind of bear in mind. I think there's a bit of a trade-off there.
I think one thing I'll add is, so we've gone from a world at Regal where I think something like 10 to 15%, but 2 to 3 quarters ago, 10 to 15% of our code was generated by AI, and now that's closer to like 75%. And I think one of the hardest parts of making that transition was the change in the job, in particular for the senior software engineer. If you've historically been very good at writing code, that's a very specific type of job. Now, basically, the bottleneck moves to design up front and QA in the back end, which is a much more painful job and actually starts to resemble less an IC role and much more like a manager role, which many of these senior engineers like have strived to avoid their entire career, because you gotta like really be meticulous. You can't enter a flow state. It's a lot harder. So I think that transition I've seen people struggle with, and it's like important to acknowledge that it's a different job.
Yeah, we're starting to see bottlenecks in bug fixing. Like I'm starting to have dedicated teams for bug fixing because vibe coding is producing more bugs. We're also seeing QA and design work on the front end becoming a backlog. That's where new bottlenecks are emerging. Go ahead.
Yeah, something that we've been thinking about is like how do we separate the concept of what's like vibe coding, or I'll call it coding without oversight, and coding with oversight, right? And like coding with oversight, I would put in the kind of co-pilot sort of way of generating code. So like, I'd be hard pressed to say less than like 80% of our code is AI generated, but it's often generated, like most of that is generated with oversight, let's call it. It's these, like what you were talking about, actually, kind of everybody here, it's that oversight piece, and when it comes in a big dump, like in the middle of the night and wake up and it's like, okay, it has all these PRs that now have fixed all this stuff. Well, now somebody has to go in and review that, and that's a very different job than what I've been hired to do.
But I want to challenge that, because my developers say that they are oversighting. But are they?
Well, and that's the good question. Like, would you put them in charge of a code review for other developers?
And then when we do PRs, are we just having an AI do the PR?
Right.
So maybe I should just have AI on top of AI on top of AI doing all the PR review, because by the time they're done going through 3 or 4 layers, I will have found the defect. You know what I mean?
So the way we found a little bit of success is basically if you use the Claude to write the PR, we use other systems to review the PR. Okay. And we have at least a couple of those. And once they have finished the review, then a human looks at it. So at least we saw that works pretty well.
That's interesting. Quick, we brought this up and I want to come back to it. I don't know, Mark, if you're using open source at all. Are you using open source models, or are you using only the large public models for your product? Maybe you don't want to admit it out loud.
No, I think for our product itself is LLM agnostic, but we are just kind of swapping in Gemini, Anthropic, OpenAI right now. We're not using open source models.
So I'm just wondering, like I built a Kimi K2 model in Google, and I ran it through our RAG process, and I get just as good results than I do with a high token burn model. So now, of course, I have to pay the $5-6 grand to keep it running, right? But once you get to the usage limit, you kind of wonder, is this even worth passing this off to an API simply for performance reasons?
Yeah, I think it's obviously down to the nature of business as well. Like for us, we touch customer interactions, so it's like, and we're dealing with enterprise companies, a lot of them regulated as well, banks, financial institutions, healthcare providers. So I think there's still like, I don't know, like it's not, maybe the security concern is really like a change management concern still right now, where people are historically happy with the T's and C's, terms of service from a Salesforce and a Zendesk, and they are from Google, OpenAI, and Anthropic right now. So that's kind of the way we look at it. But yeah, I completely agree. Like when it comes to like a cost and output, the open source stuff definitely could be interchangeable. It's whether your customers will allow it to be interchangeable.
So Tallat, when it comes to building a purpose-built agent, or when I have something that's performing a discrete task, why do I need a generalist trained model to do that? Why wouldn't I just use a purpose-built model for that? I mean, what are your opinion on that?
So that's a good one, especially since fine-tuning is becoming easier and easier, and it's becoming cheaper and cheaper. So you would want to do that if you have the right data set to fine-tune, and then you can fine-tune a smaller model, right? So for example, the general purpose one, if it was like 120 billion parameters, you can fine-tune maybe a 32 billion one for this. The only place where that starts breaking is basically the general purpose models. The releases are happening at such a high pace that if you do not keep updating the base model of your fine-tune, then you're not gonna be able to use the latest and greatest that these generalized models can do, right? So you always have to be on top of that. Okay, fine, you fine-tune based on, let's say, Quen or something. Now Quen released a new model, right? So a version of it. You need to fine-tune your model again using the new base. And if you have 50 different use cases, now you fine-tune 50 different models, how are you gonna manage them, right? So that starts becoming complicated as well as expensive. Now you need to host all those 50 versions. So that's why still I think there's utility in using general purpose models, but soon I think people will go in a direction where more and more people will use a fine-tuned version. But you saw OpenAI, they even stopped the fine-tuning service and whatnot because that's not catching up as much as people were hoping.
It's like the little Minions cartoon with the little minions. It's like, I think we underestimate how many little agents and models are gonna be running in the modern enterprise. I mean, it's novelty right now. We're all excited and it's cool, but what happens when you have 300, hi, my name's Guy Reams. I burned, 15 billion tokens last month with all my little minions. We're about ready to wrap up. So what I would like to do is just quick around the horn, hear from each of you. Just closing comments, advice to the audience on how they should handle AI in their environments or with their customers or with their new company they're founding or whatnot. So Mark, we'll start with you and I'll work our way around.
Cool. Yeah, I think I think the starting point is actually finding something that it actually makes sense to apply AI to. I think a lot of people, as you said, are just rushing to let's deploy AI everywhere. We operate in the customer support realm. So customer support's a very obvious one. There's a lot of repeatable tasks. There's data sources from integrations. There's context from knowledge bases. So this is a very obvious place to start. So I think even the larger enterprises that we work with, it's meeting them where they're at in their AI journey. So customer support's an early one. So I think customer support, sales, things that it's quite easy to see a direct ROI. That would be my recommendation for getting started. Obviously somewhat biased because that's the kind of the realm of business I operate in, but yeah, I wouldn't go automating your SOC 2 compliance anytime soon using an AI agent.
Good point.
I think the finding a personal source of just busy work and figuring out how to automate that with an agent is a great first step. But then just one level on top of that, treat it like a science experiment. You have this hypothesis that it can do the job 70% as well as you can. Actually ground truth it out. Figure out how to make a data set of here's what I would have done, or go and take, look at your previous performance on these things based on the input, and have that as a source of data so that you can rerun this thing over and over on that set of data and say, how well did I do? What's the percentage correct that it got? So that you can start to see, hey, does it do the job? How much time did it take me to get it to do the job well? How much did it cost me? And then was this worth it? And I think that's a great place to start before you start feeding it all kinds of other data.
That's too rational. We don't worry about costs. It's AI. We don't worry about costs. Don't bring up costs with AI. We just burn. Go ahead.
So if anyone ever had the unfortunate pleasure of being an analyst at a management consulting firm, you might have been sent to a retailer with a stopwatch. And the point was you were doing these time and motion studies where you were following employees around and checking to see how long they were fidgeting with hangers or moving different things around. The point was to construct a bottoms-up task-based model of how much labor you needed in each of your stores or locations. So I think very similarly, when people put entire jobs into an AI tool, they end up quite disappointed because its ability to execute on the underlying tasks vary. Some it can do very well, some it can do very poorly. So if you don't do this already, I suggest maybe ask a friend or become more self-aware and run the stopwatch on yourself and try not to automate entire pieces of work, but instead break them down to the smallest portions and then identify which of those tasks don't require judgment or unique differentiated knowledge that you have. I think many times when you do that, you find fast ways to apply AI to your work and lever your output. So, we are very early. If you're here, you're very early. There's still so much to go accomplish, and the models are only getting better and better. But start by finding places that are, small addressable tasks.
So I think I agree with what folks have said. I'll just add two more things. One is basically, I think overall the society somehow became way more forgiving to AI than they were before. For example, like I used to work at Google before this startup, and if at that time Google search would produce wrong results, there would be serious consequences. People would talk for it for a while. Now look at Gemini can give you completely hallucinated answers. OpenAI ChatGPT can say the completely wrong thing, but people move on. Like they make fun of it on Reddit for 5 minutes, but then they move on, right? Same goes for so many other examples. Like if you look at the downtime for Claude, it's significant, but somehow they are still getting so much traction because there's enough value in it. The code produced by Claude has so many errors, right? But people forgive that and they move on. So you should do the same, basically. Don't try to run after perfection. There's gonna be a lot of probabilistic systems here, so it's fine to just go with that. Second is like using AI to move quickly. Definitely, like I think now is the opportunity to do that. So.
Well, with that, thank you everybody for participating today. Thank you to our panelists, and thank you.